So things started to get a bit serious. So you've ended up in goal. Your injury's better now, so you can start kicking it. And then talk to us about how you started at Forest. So how did you start becoming, let's call it a bit more professional at a professional club? And how did you get to Forest? What went on?
Well, while I was still at school, my PE teacher, he wrote off for a couple of trials for me, and came back. I went down to Arsenal. I went to Derby County, and I was actually lucky enough that Derby County was going to take me on. And at that particular time, that it was Dave Mackay that was the manager, and the goalkeeping coach, youth coach, was a man called Alan Hill. And he actually went back to work with Brian Clough at Forest. And so I was literally going to sign for Derby when I was 15, but ended up going to Nottingham Forest, who I'd previously had a trial with and heard nothing back. So it was, again, that's another fortunate thing for me that Alan went there and he decided to take me there.
Yeah, wow. So signed for them just after, well, age 15. You arrive at the club. What was it like when you finished school and you were there then full time?
Well, again, it sounds weird me saying this, but again, I just think I'm fortunate all the way through, because even while I was at school, I ended up playing in the reserves while at 15. So again, men's football, playing with or against professionals. I remember playing against sort of Jeff Hurst. Barry Butlin was in our team.
Wow.
So it was really sort of strange at that age to be, like I said, going back to watching them on Match of the Day, and then to actually playing against them at 15-year-old. It was surreal, really.
Yeah. What was that like when you first, I'm going to make up a scenario here, but you turn up at Forest one day and you're on the reserve team, starting 11, and you're playing with and against some of your idols that you've watched. What was that like?
It was. I think it was only when I came away from the games and sat down that I used to think, oh, gosh, I've just played against such and such, and I've played on at the City Ground, or I've played at one of the other, like Stoke City's Victoria Ground, wasn't it? Stoke City's.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And, playing there and coming back and thinking, wow, I can't believe I've just done that. And it was just something that I thought, I'm going to do everything I possibly can, to go all the way. It sounds, again, a bit silly, but we got told that we needed to go to college on a day release. And the hardest day's training was actually that day when I had to go to college. So I went for about a month, and then I felt that I was just like falling back a little bit in my training. So I stopped going to college and just concentrated on football.
So you talked about it was surreal playing against, some of your idols and people you were seeing on telly. What were some of like the coping mechanisms that you used, because some young goalkeepers that might be listening to this, or coaches who need to support goalkeepers to be confident going into a game, or who might be anxious about performances. What kind of thoughts did you have in your head? What did you do to kind of get, prepare yourself for them games and to perform?
I just think I wouldn't say I went into like I think a lot of people that they go in and they have real deep thoughts about things and you've got to do this, but I think I was more worried about going into games. Say, not worried, but apprehensive about going into games before I actually got out onto the pitch. And back then, you didn't go out on the pitch to warm up. You had your warm up in the dressing room, or in the excuse me, in where the baths were, or the showers. So you would just be throwing a ball up against the wall and catching it and doing your stretches. So there you were sort of feeling that apprehension. But as soon as I went out onto the pitch, I just didn't. I felt relaxed and comfortable in a strange sort of way.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So things got a little bit more serious. So you've left school now, age 16, and then by the age of 18, you've made your debut for the first team. So, tell us a little about that and a little bit about the goalkeepers that were around at the time as well.
Well, that all came about with Brian Clough signing Peter Shilton, and he signed him. He sold John Middleton and Peter Wells. John Middleton to Derby, and Peter Wells went earlier to Southampton, I think. And so I didn't even realise that Peter Shilton was cup tied. This is how naive I was. I just carried on, just playing in the reserves. And I think somebody came up to me and just said, "You do realise that Schultz is like cup tied in the League Cup?" And I went, "No." He said, "Well, that means you're going to be playing." And I thought, even then, well, probably somebody else will come in and, whether it's loan. I can't even remember if you could have loans back then. But so it was like, again, just really sort of out of my thought zone. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't until he actually turned around and said, "You're playing," that you sort of started to feel a little bit apprehensive.
And how much notice did he give you? When did you find out?
I found out in the week leading up to the game. But like I say, people had been saying before that that you would be playing. But like I said, I still was expecting another goalkeeper probably to come in and play. And they may have done that, but we played Notts County, so it was a local derby. I was only 17 at the time, and fortunately we won 4-0.
Wow. So was that deep? Was that week any different leading up to that for you?
Well, I always used to train, obviously, with Schultz all the time. I've got to say that leading up to that week, he concentrated a little bit more on what I was doing rather than what he was doing, which I'm very grateful for. And that was something that I sort of carried on in my career, thinking, well, if somebody like that is going to help me, then that's the way that I've got to be when hopefully I can achieve some sort of a level like he has done.
Yeah. And at this stage of Schultz's career, he's a seasoned pro, a regular with England. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he came into Forest, and I think everybody knows that. I mean, he must have earned them probably between 12 and 15 points, in his first season. So, again, it was somebody that I'd been watching on television, and I idolised the man. I thought he was such a good goalkeeper, and I wanted to be as good if I could.
So what kind of influence did he have on you as a goalkeeper? So you're now training with one of the best goalkeepers in the country, arguably the world, every day. What influence did he have on you? What stuff did you pick up from him? Tell us a bit about it.
The big thing is his work ethic. He knew when to work hard, and he knew when to rest his body just before a game. Some of the training techniques that he had, I would still do them to this day.
Like what? Tell us, like what would they be like?
Well, agility wise, stamina wise, picking balls up, really like little volleys, just turning off the post. Like everything is like up, down. You're seeing things. It's like somebody coming across a 6-yard box, and the ball's been squared across him, and it's a pretty close in. I mean, it's not hammered at you because you need to feel the ball and be as quick and reactive as you possibly can. And I think that was one of the drills that I really took from him and worked on it all through my career.
Brilliant. So that's then thrown you in as the League Cup keeper for that season. How did the season wrap up?
Well, unfortunately or unfortunately, we went all the way to Wembley, and well, we played Liverpool at Wembley, drew 0-0, and then the replay was at Old Trafford, which we won 1-0. So I can say that I kept a clean sheet in both of the games, but I think we were quite fortunate. I think Terry McDermott for Liverpool scored in both games, but both goals were disallowed. So that's fate for you. So
it wasn't VAR, was it?
It's a good job. If it had been around, I think it would have been allowed. So, but like I say, you take all the good look and the bad look, and hopefully it comes out pretty even at the end of the.
So am I right in thinking Wembley debut, age 18?
Yes, 18. Yeah,
90,000 fans.
I think there was 100 actually.
Wow, go on. What was that like? Any difference? Any difference to your performance or your preparation, or?
Again, just leading up to it, everybody that was involved, like the whole team, they were all sort of getting around me and encouraging me, and it was really nice of them. I've got to say, looking back, and it was like they sort of took me under their wing, so to speak. And again, Schultz was different class leading up to that game. I always remember that they were doing interviews with some of the Liverpool players on the way down. I think they came down on the train. And Ray Clements, who's a good friend of mine as well, he said that the first time he played at Wembley was he sort of froze a bit. Now, I didn't know whether that was mind games or whatever, but the good thing was that back then, you obviously you went out onto the pitch, and when I walked out, I thought to myself, "Oh my goodness, this is the." I hadn't even been to Wembley to watch a game, as a supporter or anything. So it was my first time there, and to walk out actually onto the pitch, up the tunnel and everything, it was like. Well, I mean, it was a bit daunting to say the least, but it was, again, really weird because I came out and the first thing I had to do, I did okay, and it set me up for the game. And I think I made quite a few saves that day. I did actually drop one, and it came out, and I've got in my mind view of me dropping it and Dalglish like running in, and we both get to the ball at the same time, and I actually make a really good block on it. And I always remember Kenny, like, because we didn't even wear gloves those days, and Kenny turning around, like I was holding my finger and everything like that, and Kenny was saying, "Are you okay?" So it was just surreal. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything to go better, even if it could.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm just looking at a brilliant newspaper cutting here that says, "I just hope I'm not too nervous." So it was obviously on your mind that there might be some nerves involved, understandably. Can you recollect anything that prevented you from not freezing, as you just mentioned, and being able to perform so well on such a big occasion?
Not other than the fact that everybody was like over. I suppose when I look back, it's probably too much, but at the time it wasn't, because everybody was saying, "You're going to be all right. This is good. You're good enough. You can do this." And I think everybody just saying that to me sort of calmed me down. And like I say, once I got on that pitch, I think the nerves was there on the pitch. And once I got back in to get changed, I couldn't wait to get out there. I mean, all right, I suppose when I say I haven't got an awful lot to lose, it probably could have been the end of my career. But if I'm exaggerating, but if it had all gone wrong, they would have probably turned around and said, "Well, he was only 18. What do you expect?" At this day and age, you very rarely would get like a football club or a manager putting an 18-year-old young goalkeeper into such a high-profile game.
Yeah, amazing. Fantastic to just hear you talk about that, because goalkeepers at all levels will definitely be nervous going into games. Some will have some anxiety and nerves actually stepping onto the pitch, and you use the word freeze. Some people would. I've just heard you say that, like, you played with nerves, but you didn't let them affect you. So actually, I'm just thinking about the people listening. Like, having nerves while you're playing isn't a bad thing. It's just accepting them and being able to perform. And the other thing I heard you mention was getting the first thing right, getting your first action right. So I'm guessing that action probably wasn't like a really big save or a really important action. It was probably just a routine thing, was it?
Yeah, that's right, and that even went on, I think, throughout my career. Playing in big games and just getting over that first initial thing that you need to do, and you're doing that correct. And as strange as it may sound, it made me feel better in myself if the other goalkeeper had done something that wasn't quite right, and all of a sudden it made you puff your chest out a little bit more. But it's on the other side of the shoe. It's like if you do something wrong, then that's where you need to like refocus and make sure that that mistake doesn't affect the rest of your game. So it was just something that I went through my career with, thinking that I do the first thing right, and it just sets you up for how you want to be throughout the match.
Yeah, amazing. No, thanks for sharing that. There'll be so many people take stuff from that, Chris. So I'm just going to ask you just to reflect now, and I'm just going to paint this in in what today's kind of version of this would be. So from you left Forest to join QPR, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So you had.
Sorry.
Go on.
I was just going to say I stayed another year after the League Cup final, again just as an apprenticeship in my eyes, to work another year with Peter Shilton before I needed to step out on my own accord.
Yeah. So over the next kind of like 5 to 10 years, or 10 years, you've had four massive moves really. So going back then, 2 moves that were well over, well, £250,000, 250,000, a £600,000 move up to Rangers, and then a £1 million move back to Sheffield. That's Sheffield Wednesday. That's the equivalent of probably like, in today's money, I'm imagining like £2 £20 million moves, a £30 million move, and a 50. Tell us a bit about that. How did you deal with them kind of massive milestones and transfer fees?
I didn't really think of the transfer. More of the last one, when I went to Wednesday, I thought, oh, that's £1 million. That was quite an awful lot. But it wasn't something that I really thought about. I think the biggest thing for me was the move, probably from Norwich to Rangers, because you go up there for like £600,000, and I think everybody knows that back in the days that it was a bit of a standing joke about Scottish goalkeepers. So I think you have that on your shoulders as well, coming up there as an English goalkeeper and having to do things the right way and showing that you're not, I don't know, making mistakes. Like we all used to sit round on Football Focus and watch, and then we got Scottish football come up, and it was a bit of a standing joke that watching the goals go in, and so that was just something that I felt a little bit more pressure moving up there because of that, rather than the fee for the move.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. So you've made an, you played for Norwich over 200 times. You played for Rangers 175 times. Sheffield Wednesday over 100 times. So you've amassed a huge amount of games there in like a 10-year period. What was that like? To performing that many times, that consistently, that often. What was that like?
Well, again, just going back to when you start, and it's something that you want to achieve in your career, and to actually, I always think I looked up to Peter Shilton, and that's what I wanted to emulate, and to actually go and play first team football for continuous consecutive games and things like that. That was what I'd set out to do, and fortunately, I achieved that. Don't get me wrong; it wasn't smooth sailing all the way. There were good times and there were bad times with injuries and with mistakes that you make as being a goalkeeper. You're the one that last line of defence, and if there's anything that you do wrong, then generally it ends up in the back of the net. So you've got to have broad shoulders as well to be a goalkeeper.
Okay, that probably brings me on to my next question. So you're obviously doing brilliant. What made you so good? And please don't be humble about it. What made you so good? What kind of stuff would we have seen that made you so good? And then following up on that, how did you do it? How were you so good? What were you doing that made you that good?
I'd like to think natural ability. Like I say, going back to when I was a kid, I felt easy diving both ways. I could save shots. I used to. Even when I was saving shots, it wasn't good enough to save a shot and parry it away. I wanted to keep it, and that was generally what I did all through my career. Just trying to keep balls and doing the right thing, really.
And then
Sorry,
what
was the other
what
part?
kind what yeah, kind of like that was your skill. How did you go about, like, what kind of training did you do that made you good at that? How did you equip yourself with them skills? I know you're saying it was natural, but what did training look like for you?
Well, training generally looked like, going back there, it was like I would play outfield like five-a-side for probably 2 or 3 days a week to start with. Then we would go into like a crossing session or a shooting session, and then I'd take on board what I learned from Peter Shilton. In my reaction work, I would get some of the outfield players just to come and help me do that. So, that was the sort of things that I sort of put into my game. But there was no real goalkeeping coaching at that particular time. It started to come in as I obviously got older, but it was more one day a week that we had the goalkeeping coach came in.
So if you could go back now to that kind of era, what would you do differently, knowing what you know now?
I think all the technology and the analysis. We didn't have any analysis or anything like that. The strength and fitness work, although we did our own weights, and the goalkeepers did all the outfield running before we had to go in goal. So by that time, your legs were like jelly, and then they were expecting you to dive and save things. But I would change that, and I would, obviously, it would be nice to actually put that into practice just to see if that helped, which I'm sure it would do, and would it have prolonged your career, looking after yourself a little bit better, because I think everybody knows that back in those days that everybody trained hard, they played hard, and they went out and they socialised quite hard together as well. But again, that back then, that was a team unity sort of thing that everybody sort of did.
Yeah. And would you have done anything different training wise? Is there anything that you know now that when you look back you think, right, I would make that change to my game, how I kept goal, or be higher, be deeper, things like that?
Yeah, I think again with the analysis side of things, I've watched games where I've let goals in, and probably they've not been my fault, but as I've watched them back, I thought to myself, if I'd have just been half a yard, maybe further to my left, I might have got a hand to that. But we didn't have the technology to do that sort of thing. So that is something that I think would definitely have helped improve me through my career.